King of Cool's Last Lesson, Part 1. The Class He Never Asked to Join. Steve McQueen had arrived at the dojo on a Tuesday morning in the spring of 1974 without calling ahead. This was consistent with his character, as Chuck would come to understand over the years that followed. McQueen did not call ahead because calling ahead created a situation, created anticipation and preparation, and the particular quality of performed normality that happens when someone knows that something exceptional is about to arrive. He preferred to arrive as a fact rather than an announcement. He had been doing this for 20 years in Hollywood, which had a culture of advance notice and managed entrance, and his consistent refusal to participate in that culture was, by 1974, one of the things about him that the culture had decided to absorb rather than resist. He was 43 years old. He was, by any reasonable measure, the most famous man in the world who had chosen to spend a Tuesday morning learning to throw a proper roundhouse kick from a karate instructor in Torrance. He was driving a truck, not a famous person's truck, not the kind of vehicle that announces its owner through the quality of its appointment. A working truck, with mud on the tires and a coffee cup in the holder, and the indefinable quality of being owned by someone who actually used it. He came through the door during the mid-morning break between the Tuesday advanced class and the 11 o'clock beginner session, when Chuck was in the office doing the administrative work he sandwiched between sessions: enrollment paperwork, utility correspondence, the ongoing maintenance of a school's operational reality. He heard the front door and came out of the office. McQueen was standing in the middle of the dojo floor, looking at the space with the evaluative attention of a man who had spent his professional life assessing environments, how they would translate on film, what they revealed about the people who occupied them, what kind of story they were capable of telling. He was wearing jeans and a work shirt, and the particular physical quality that he carried everywhere, a compact, coiled readiness, the body of someone who had never stopped moving in the way that matters. "I want to learn," he said when he saw Chuck. "Not I'd like to, not I was thinking about. Just, I want to learn." "What do you know already?" Chuck said. "Nothing useful," McQueen said. "The kind of movie fighting you do when you've never done real fighting." "How often can you come?" "Twice a week, maybe 3 times if the schedule allows." He looked around the dojo with a quality of focus that made the looking itself an act of assessment. "I want to know what it actually is," he said. "Not what it looks like, what it is." Chuck looked at him. Then he said, "Tuesday and Thursday, 8 o'clock. Don't be late." "I won't be late," McQueen said. He was not late, not once in 3 years. Part 2. What kind of student he was. He was not a gifted student in the technical sense. He was 43 years old when he started, which meant that his body had its established movement patterns and its established relationship with physical effort, and those patterns resisted the new inputs with the particular resistance of mature systems asked to reorganize. He was not graceful in the early sessions. He was deliberate and focused, and occasionally frustrated, with a specific quality of frustration that never became complaint because complaint implied that the difficulty was someone else's fault, and McQueen's working assumption was that difficulty was his problem to solve. What made him an exceptional student was his attention. He watched with the quality of someone who absorbed rather than noted, not cataloging information but taking it in, so that when he repeated a technique or a sequence, he was not repeating from memory but from something closer to understanding. This was not the most common mode of learning in adult beginners. Most adults learn by approximation. They get near the technique and refine gradually. McQueen learned by comprehension. He watched until he understood what the technique was trying to do, and then he did it. Chuck had been teaching for 11 years by the time McQueen walked through the door and had developed, in that time, the specific sensitivity to student learning styles that good teaching requires. He adjusted his instruction for McQueen, more emphasis on the principle behind the technique, less on the step-by-step acquisition of the form. He found that McQueen responded to the why more than the how, that explaining the mechanical logic of a movement produced faster assimilation than demonstrating the movement itself. Between sessions, they sometimes talked. Not always. McQueen was not a man who required conversation as part of his relationship with an experience, but occasionally after the session ended and the floor was cooling and both of them were in the particular state of having worked hard and finished working, they would sit on the bench along the wall and talk. McQueen talked about his childhood, which had been difficult in the way that childhoods are difficult when they are shaped by absence and early responsibility, by a father who left and a mother who was not consistently available, and the years of his own management of himself in conditions that did not support good management. He talked about this without self-pity, which Chuck noted as consistent with the man's overall character. The past was information. It had produced certain things. He was those things, and those things had their costs and their compensations, and talking about the past was a way of being clear about the present. He talked about the film career with a quality that surprised Chuck at first, and that he came to understand over months, a kind of comfortable distance from it, as though the career were something that happened to a person he was connected to but who was not entirely him. Not dissatisfaction. He was proud of the work, he took it seriously, he was in many ways defined by it. But the public version of Steve McQueen, the king of cool, the face on the posters, the name that made people look, this he wore with the ease of someone who had made his peace with the gap between the public version and the private one, and who had decided that the gap was not a problem to solve but a condition to manage. Chuck understood this. He was beginning to manage a version of the same gap. At Part 3, the thing he said about acting. It was in the second month of training that McQueen made the observation that would redirect Chuck's life. They had finished a session. McQueen had been working on the defensive sequence from the intermediate form, which required a quality of grounded lateral movement that was still not natural to him, and that he was approaching with the methodical patience he brought to everything that was genuinely difficult. Chuck had noticed something in the way McQueen received correction, not the technique of receiving it, which was professional and attentive, but the underlying quality, the way he integrated the correction before it was fully articulated, picking up the instruction from the gesture or the shift of weight before the words were complete. He said this out loud, because he said things out loud when they were true and worth saying. McQueen looked at him with the quality that was his version of interest, slightly inward, like someone turning something over to look at it from the other side. That's how I read a set, he said, on film. Before they call action, I'm reading the environment, the props, the lighting, the other actor's position. By the time we shoot, I've already been in it for 20 minutes. You do the same thing in the match, Chuck said, before it starts. McQueen thought about this. Yeah, he said. Same instinct. He looked at the floor. That's interesting. I don't usually think of the two things as connected. They're the same thing, Chuck said. The reading, the presence inside an environment before anything happens. Most people do it unconsciously or not at all. You do it consciously, which means you can apply it deliberately. McQueen looked at him. Then he said, You do the same thing when you're in front of this class. I hope so, Chuck said. No, McQueen said. I mean it specifically. I've watched you for 8 weeks. When you come out of the office and you walk to the floor, before you say a word, before you start, you've already read the room. You know where everybody is, what kind of attention they're bringing, what the energy is, and you adjust before you start. He paused. That's not teaching technique, that's performance. Specifically, you have presence. Chuck looked at him. I'm a teacher. You're also a performer, McQueen said. You just don't know that's what you're doing. He said it the way he said things that were true, not to persuade, not to flatter, but as a plain statement of something he had observed and assessed and determined to be accurate. His manner of saying things had no investment in the listener's response. He said the thing, and then he was done. They sat with it for a while. "You should try acting," McQueen said. "I've never had an acting class," Chuck said. "I know," McQueen said. "That's why I'm the one telling you to try it. You've got the foundation. Classes can fill in the rest." Chuck looked at the dojo floor, at the mirror on the west wall, at the room he had built from a former laundromat through 11 years of early mornings and accumulated decisions. "I'm a karate teacher," he said. "You're also what I said," McQueen said. "Both things are true. The karate teacher doesn't go away because you add another dimension." Or Part 4, the 6 years between. McQueen left the dojo for the last time in the autumn of 1977, not because the training had run its course. It hadn't, in the way that genuine learning never quite runs its course. He left because the illness had begun, though neither of them named it at the time. He had been experiencing a cough that didn't resolve, a fatigue that sat underneath the usual fatigue of his extremely active life. He reduced his sessions gradually over the summer, and then, in October, came for a final session that he did not announce as final. He trained for 90 minutes. He did the defensive sequence that had been difficult in the beginning and that was now, 3 years later, clean and well settled in his body. He did the full intermediate form without stopping. He cooled down and changed and came out to the bench. "I need to take a break from this for a while," he said. Chuck nodded. "When you're ready to come back, come back." McQueen looked at the dojo floor. "I might not," he said. Not as a dramatic statement, just as a possibility he was putting on the table, the way he put things on the table. "Then come back when it's right," Chuck said. They shook hands. McQueen left in the truck. The diagnosis came months later, mesothelioma, which was not yet widely understood as the disease that asbestos exposure produces, and which McQueen's doctors in California told him was beyond treatment. He sought experimental treatment in Mexico, which the American medical establishment regarded with skepticism. He found faith, the Christian faith that he had come to in the preceding years, through a series of encounters and experiences that he talked about in interviews with the matter-of-fact simplicity he applied to everything that was genuinely important to him. He had converted quietly, without announcement, which was consistent with his character. Chuck heard about the illness through the channels that Hollywood runs on, the word that moves through networks of connection, the information that arrives before it is public. He did not call because McQueen's preference in all things was for the approach rather than the announcement, and because calling would have required McQueen to manage someone else's response to his illness, which was a demand Chuck was not going to make. In the summer of 1980, McQueen called him. Part 5, The Last Conversation. The call came on a Thursday morning in August. The timing was precise enough that Chuck wondered afterward whether McQueen had known it would be a Thursday and had chosen that day for some reason connected to the original Tuesday-Thursday training schedule that they had kept for 3 years. He sounded like himself. This was the first thing Chuck noticed. The illness was advanced. Chuck knew this from the information that had been circulating, and yet the voice had its characteristic quality, direct, unhurried, without the softening that serious illness often produces in people's speech patterns. McQueen did not perform wellness. He was simply himself, which was the consistent achievement of his life. "I wanted to talk to you," he said, "before I can't." "I'm glad you called," Chuck said. "I'm going to say some things," McQueen said. "Some of them you know. I'll say them anyway because they should be said in a room between people rather than assumed." "All right," Chuck said. "What you taught me in that dojo," McQueen said, "was not primarily karate. I want to be clear about that. The karate was useful, and I learnt it as well as I was going to learn it. But what you actually taught me was a thing about presence, about being inside an environment before it requires you to act, and being fully inside it rather than monitoring it from the outside. I had some of that instinct before I came to you. What I got from 3 years in your room was the discipline to apply it consistently rather than just when it came naturally. Chuck listened. I used it, McQueen said, specifically in the last few productions I was on. The kind of presence that a set requires, reading it, being in it, making choices before action is called. I applied it more deliberately after you and I talked about it. It changed the quality of the work. He paused. I wanted you to know that something specific came back, not just general improvement, something specific from what we worked on. Good, Chuck said. I'm glad. Now, McQueen said, the other thing, I want to say something about what I told you in 1974, about acting. I remember, Chuck said. You didn't believe me immediately, McQueen said. You believed the logic, but you didn't believe it about yourself. You thought I was seeing something that wasn't there, or was seeing something that was there but wasn't as significant as I was saying it was. He paused. You've had 6 years of evidence since then. The films, the way the audiences respond, the critics, some of them. He paused again. Was I wrong? Chuck thought about the last 6 years, about Breaker, and the critics who had dismissed it and the audiences who had not. About Good Guys Wear Black and the $18 million and the specific quality of confirmation that comes when the thing you were skeptical about turns out to be real. About the particular experience of standing in front of a camera and finding, against his prior expectations, that the skills his life had built, the presence, the reading, the physical authority, translated into the medium with a directness that had surprised him. No, he said. You weren't wrong. I know I wasn't wrong, McQueen said, without any quality of I told you so, just as a statement of accuracy. I'm saying it because you should hear it confirmed. People who change direction in their careers because someone they trust tells them to, they need the confirmation eventually. You're getting it late and from the wrong direction, but you're getting it. Chuck was quiet for a moment. What do you mean the wrong direction? I mean I'm confirming it from a hospital bed in Mexico rather than from a Tuesday morning conversation in a dojo in Torrance, McQueen said. The timing is wrong. The content is right. Part 6. The last thing he said. They talked for an hour. McQueen talked about the illness with the same quality he brought to everything, clear-eyed, without drama, without the performance of either acceptance or resistance. He was 49 years old. The experimental treatment in Mexico had not produced the results he had hoped for. He had made his arrangements, the practical ones that illness requires, the arrangements for the people who would remain. He had his faith, which was present in the call the way it was present in everything about him in his last years. Not announced, not performing, simply there, load-bearing. He talked about the films he had made and the ones he hadn't. About a project he had been developing that was not going to happen now, which he described without bitterness as simply a thing that was not going to happen, the way a lot of things don't happen when you run out of time. He talked about the karate, about specific sessions, 3 years of Tuesday and Thursday mornings compressed into a handful of vivid particulars, the defensive sequence, and the moment it had finally resolved into something clean. A sparring session in which he had done something correctly and instinctively and had known it the moment he did it, which he said was one of the best feelings the training had produced. Toward the end of the hour, he said, "One more thing. Tell me," Chuck said. "Don't let the film career become the thing that takes over from the other things," McQueen said. "The teaching, the school, the thing you do in the room with people, that's the primary thing. The films are what you can do with what you know. The teaching is the knowing itself." He paused. "I made a mistake, not a catastrophic one, but I let the career become the primary thing for too long, at the expense of the things underneath it that made the career possible. You're younger than I was when I figured that out." He paused again. "Keep the dojo. Whatever the films do, keep the dojo." Chuck was quiet. "That's the last lesson," McQueen said. "I'll send it without a grade." The last joke, delivered in the flat, dry manner that was his version of warmth. "I'll keep the dojo," Chuck said. "Good," McQueen said. "All right. I've said what I called to say." They said goodbye with the economy of men who know what goodbye might mean and who do not want to make it larger than it is, because making it larger than it is a form of dishonesty, and both of them had spent their lives being honest about the things that mattered. Steve McQueen died in November of 1980 in Juarez, Mexico. He was 49 years old. Epilogue: The Dojo on Hawthorne. Chuck kept the dojo. Through the film career that McQueen had predicted and that arrived in the years after Good Guys Wear Black, through the Missing in Action trilogy and the other productions that occupied his time and his attention, through the years when the name Chuck Norris accumulated a weight in American culture that he had not anticipated and that required its own management, through all of this, the dojo on Hawthorne Boulevard remained, not unchanged. It grew, expanded, moved to a larger space, acquired additional instructors and more students and the apparatus that comes with a school that has been operating for long enough to know what it needs. But the essential thing remained: the floor, the morning sessions, the 5 o'clock start, the specific quality of work that happens when you bring full attention to the teaching of a discipline to people who have decided they want to learn it. He thought about McQueen often. Not with the persistent quality of grief, that was reserved for Wieland, which was a different and deeper loss, but with the specific quality of thinking about someone who had given you something that you are still using, which is a form of ongoing gratitude rather than mourning. The last lesson had been, keep the primary thing primary. Don't let the evidence of the work become more important than the work. Chuck had not always succeeded at this. The films produced their own logic, their demands, their timelines, their particular form of urgency. There were years when the dojo got less of him than it deserved, and he knew it and corrected it when he could. But the dojo was always there. The floor was always there. The 5 o'clock mornings were always there. He had kept his promise. McQueen had given him the career by telling him it was possible. He had taken the career and done something with it. And then McQueen, from a hospital bed in Mexico, had told him the most important thing. The career was not the point. The point was the room. The point was always the room.